So if you have a $40,000 income right now, that equates to an hourly pay of about $19 an hour. If you're curious, okay, where does that stack up across American earners in this country? Well, for individuals that work 40 plus hours, that would put you in the 29th percentile of income earners. For households, if you have a household income of $40,000, that puts you in the 24th percentile of income earners.
75% of households are making more, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you got to be very deliberate with every dollar that comes into your army of dollar bills.
So when we think about this, after we're not factoring in automatic payroll deductions to 401k or HSA or varying state taxes, on average, the take-home pay, if you have a $40,000 income, is going to be about $2,800 per month. And so the thought becomes, okay, well, if my take-home is $2,800 a month, how should I spread that out? How am I going to be able to make the ends meet on that level of income?
Yeah, every dollar that comes in is going to be important. This is, when we talk about, when I wrote Millionaire Mission and we talk about typical behaviors, I was talking about being laser focused. And look, I like as much as anybody to give you latitude on how you spend so that you can hopefully save money, be deliberate with it. But at this level, $40,000, it's not a, what can I do? Can I go out to eat? It's what every dollar has to do for you. You have to think about this on not only how you eat, the cars you drive, how you live and structure your life. It's that important because what works for a lot of people, you're going to have to be much more laser focused just because you don't have a big shovel.
So as we think about how to divvy out our income, we want to think across needs, wants, and saving. Well, obviously at this income level, a lot more of your take-home pay is going to go towards needs. And certainly depending on where you live in this country, that will affect that. Being a family in Athens, Georgia would be very different than being a family in LA. And so the take-home pay would obviously affect that. So while we often talk about, we want to think through a split of our take-home pay around 50% goes to needs and 30% goes to wants and 20% goes to savings. At this income threshold, you may have to move those numbers a touch. It's likely going to look more like 75% of your pay goes towards needs, 15% goes towards wants, and maybe you are only put 10% towards savings.
And I think it's important to note that 10% savings, that's net income. A lot of times on the show, we're talking about gross. So you can see why every dollar has to have a purpose. That's why guys, budget. I mean, if you're not doing a budget to know exactly where every dollar is coming in and where it's going out, you're not going to be successful at this threshold.
So if 75% of your take home is going to go towards needs, that comes out to roughly $2,100. That would mean this is rent and gas and groceries and other household items, not a lot of room for wiggle room. And so then when you get to the wants, if that's going to be 15% of your take home, that's probably going to be $420. And normally this would be things like eating out or clothes or those sort of things. But in all honesty, at this threshold, you're probably not doing as much of that discretionary stuff. And what the wants actually becomes is preparing for unknown expenses that are likely going to pop up in your financial life.
Yeah, and then we, of course, talk about the savings rate. If you think about the savings rate on this, it's a little less than $300 a month. It's $280 a month. But look, every dollar, especially if you start young enough, because hopefully a lot of you guys, when you're in this, my first job right out of college was $28,000 a year. So I resembled this when I graduated but if little goes a long way. You might not be wealthy in how big your shovel, your income is, but you might be a billionaire of time if you're catching this type of content in your 20s.
But even at this income, you still need to honor the financial order of operations. Brian, will you hold up the food for me? You still need to make sure that you're keeping your risk covered. So likely at this income, your emergency fund should be somewhere between $8,000 and $16,000 to make sure that you're protected from the unknown. So if you're someone who finds yourself at this income level presently, we want to walk you through some things that you can think about to make sure you're optimizing in this stage. And the first one, Brian, you've already alluded to this a number of times, is to be intentional.
Yeah, this is the one where, look, if you're doing something that's untraditional in the fact that you don't have a big income, but yet you're trying to build financial independence on this low income, you've got to do things in a way that people are going to think you're crazy. And that's why, you might drive around that used car for well over 10 years. Yes, you might be, when your friends want to go out to eat, you're making different decisions just because it's not built into your budget. This is the part where you have to be very intentional with every dollar that comes into your army of dollar bills.
Yeah, you just said it right there. You literally must have a plan for every dollar. And one of those plans for those dollars might be planning ahead for future expenses. You can't wait for the unknown to happen. You kind of have to start now, beginning to prepare for, okay, I know that I'm going to have to replace the brakes, or I know I'm going to have to replace the tires, or I know that I have that medical thing coming up, and I'm going to begin putting aside money to prepare for those expenses.
Well, intentionality also. We always hear the latte effect, and a lot of us, even we, have been like dismissive of this. We're like, no, what type of coffee you drink is not going to derail your financial. That is false when you're at this first tier, is because every dollar is so purposeful. You might have to do grocery shopping different. Meal prep is going to be different. You're going to have to be strict with every dollar. But the good news is you can still do it. I don't want this to be a pessimistic outlook. I want you to feel like this is a lot of opportunity, but it's very deliberate that you have to make something happen.
The other thing that you have to be super careful of at this income level is to be wary of consumer debt, and you have to get rid of it if you have it. Because every dollar matters so much, what you're losing to interest payments on debt becomes more and more and more devastating. We know right now the average credit card payment on a monthly basis in this country is $273. But remember, if we were segmenting out this income and we said 10% was going to savings, you'd be saving about $280. So if I am having to spend $273 on a credit card payment, I do not have that $280 left over to save. You are paying for your past self instead of building for your future self.
And that's why we often talk about, go to moneyguy.com/resources, look at our wealth multiplier so you can see what every dollar has the potential to become. You'll think about spending completely different. And what this is a perfect compare and contrast is that if people are spending close to $280 on credit card debt monthly, and that same amount of money might be the building blocks to crossing their first $1 million, you can see how this is a decision. It really is an opportunity cost decision. Structure your life so that you don't get caught in that consumerism trap. You can't be paying 20% plus credit card interest and expect to be successful.
And then the last thing is make sure that you're patient. Yes, it's likely going to take you a little bit longer to reach some of your financial goals. You may have to save for a longer period of time. You may have to be more disciplined. Your purchases may be further out in the future, but that's okay. You can do it. You just have to be patient and make sure that you trust the process.
Yeah, we on the Money Guy Show, we talk about aspirationally, we want you saving and investing 20 to 25% of your gross income. More to come on why we did net versus gross. But a lot of you who are watching this in this $40,000 threshold are like, that seems very aspirational. Yes, we know it is. That's why we even adjusted this when we built this model to kind of show you what can and cannot happen. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't take the responsibility off of your shoulders, because we think the part of being patient is keep making steps. Set yourself up for automatic investments. Make the good habits as easy as possible. That'll also protect you from the bad habits being that much harder. But then keep being purposeful. As your shovel and your income gets better, you're going to be just poised to take advantage of that next threshold.
And be sure to give yourself grace, because any progress is still progress. It's a matter of continuing to move forward in the journey.